Welcome to my installation for September 17th, 2019. For those of you who didn't look at the introductions of the First Comes First clips, my name is David Zub, and I will be doing what I can to facilitate your learning in this theological reflection program. So hopefully by now you've been able to access the Brightspace and take a look around and look at the syllabus. I'm going to go through the assignments first of all, and then a little bit of the syllabus itself. In total, over the 2 semesters, which is the equivalent of a 1-credit course, there is a total of a maximum of 26 pages. Now, that's a maximum. The amount is easily within the 20 to 25 page parameters set by academic. We have, I'm going to be having trouble remembering that I'm actually on camera, excuse me. We have a few things to look at in that regard. So I'm going to do that first. I was going to talk about the Barbara Brown Taylor book first of all, but I think that we should probably look at the papers first of all. So first off, I'm going to ask for 4 reflection papers of 200 to 300 words. I'd prefer 200 words. 300 words is fine. When I was in the first year of my MDiv and I was studying a similar subject with Professor Clifford Elliott, he was quite stringent about the amount of space, and I had a hard time keeping within that, and I was always squeezing things. Don't overwork this. All I'm looking for is to have you talk about an encounter, some kind of an experience of the week, and to reflect on it theologically. This is a freebie. 4 papers over 2 semesters worth 6% each. If you submit all 4 papers, you get an extra bonus point for the 25%. You don't have to submit any of them. This is not a requirement at all. It's just a way for you to practice the material that's put in front of you. And it can be any kind of an encounter. You could read something and have an aha moment. What I want you to do initially is to employ Wesley's so-called quadrilateral and emphasize, first of all, biblical reflection, but also doctrine or tradition, if you will, experience of divine presence. It's not just any old experience, and reason as a subordinate reference. Don't overdo this. You can do this in any kind of way. I'm not only hoping that you will want to practice the material as you encounter it, but also that you will do work that you would otherwise have to do anyway. So it will be, it could be a small essay or a letter, for instance, the long tradition of such things. It could be an extended prayer, a call to worship, the introduction to a sermon that you're going to be looking at down the line. And it could be a story. God likes stories. That's why we exist. I like stories. I like poems too. So that's the first thing, and that's a total of 4 pages over the 2 semesters. Your first paper, due December 7th, is one of 3 things: either a full sermon and liturgy, a case study, or education or faith formation project. I really wanted to just have sermon and liturgy because, again, that's something you're going to have to do anyway. So it wouldn't be extra work per se, but it would be a little more pointed, more elaborate than you might ordinarily do. For instance, I almost never write out prayers anymore. I do them extemporaneously. I glean information from talking to people before the service. I listen to the news. But for this course, I would want to see that written out. So all 3 of those, you're looking at approximately 10 pages. That's 5 to 10 pages. Verdana 12, 1-inch margins. And I understand that I made a mistake by saying 1.5-inch spaces. If you want to do 1.5-inch spaces, if you have a hard time making it within the parameter, I'm good with that. But I understand that the actual parameters for AST are double spaced. That's fine with me too. But the rest of it holds. Verdana 12, 1-inch margins, and double spaced. That would be 10 pages maximum. It could be as little as 5. That's due December 7th. You can read the more intimate details of that on your own. The second part, the second assignment, developing theological rubrics, this is something not to be worried about at all. You're going to need to develop your own style. And I'm going to be talking about it very soon in terms of anticipating pastoral assessment and reflection. We're going to be getting into that pretty quick along the way. This is what I call a Signs of Life project. I'll tell you why I do this kind of thing. I've done 3 different commitments to teaching lay licensed worship leaders, and that occupied 6 years of my adult life. And the last one I did, they were given 3 books to read. One was Daniel Migliore's Faith-Seeking Understanding, and the other was a 2-volume set of Justo Gonzalez's book, The History of Christianity. They were not required to do any assignments on them initially, but only to read them. And we were over a year into the program, Saturdays being given up, and I got to the October of the second year of the 2-year program, and in questioning them about aspects, discovered that none of them had read any of the 3 books at all. So this is simply a Signs of Life kinds of exercise. I want to see that you're reading and that you're engaged in the question of how people do theological reflection and how you can do theological reflection, how you might employ other people's methods, but how you might also employ your own, and how you might expand on what I give you. So, to explain this a little bit more, you're going to be reading the books by Barbara Brown Taylor and Nadia Bowles-Weber. And all I want you to do is, when you do your exchanges on the Brightspace community pages, I want you each to make some kind of comment or observation or encouragement toward one another to notice certain things and come out with that. There's no grade for that. Okay, that's just something I want you to do. I don't want you to avoid the books. I want you to engage with them. But I do want you to write a paper on what you learned from those books. So that's 8 to 10 pages, Verdana 12 font, 1-inch margins, double spaced, due April 7th. I want you to compare them, describe them, compare them, and tell me what you learned from them. Some of you might prefer to introduce a book that quite likely I haven't read yet. And I'm willing to consider that, but you have to request that from me. I need a précis from you about the book. I'm not the reader I used to be. I'm not inclined to read more than what I've laid out. I do have 2 books that I've recommended that would be additional, but perhaps you have a book that you think is better. I'll need some kind of précis from you and a request to use that book instead of one of the assigned books. However, I still want you to read the 2 books by Bowles-Weber and Barbara Brown Taylor. Okay, so that assignment is due on April 7th, 2020. Understand, you can start this paper whenever you want. If you feel it's loaded too heavily to the second semester, that's just a matter of starting it earlier and working it through. If you looked at my First Comes First video, which you're not required to see, this is required, but that one you weren't. I do recommend that you keep a book journal, and when you do that journal, make sure that you put in all the quotable quotes and the things that you observe as you read the book. It seems like a lot of work, but it's really going to save you time. So there are 4 short reflection papers for 25%. You have a paper for developing pastoral rubrics that you're going to describe, compare, and discuss the styles of those 2 required books. But you can include one of your own making or one of the recommended books if you prefer. Just get back to me about that before you start. You have a practicum project due December 7th, 25%, and then discussion and participation. If we go through this and I don't hear from you, for instance, for a great deal of time, I'm going to try to find out what's going on. And but you should be expected to at least put in a line or two. When you make your online comments, keep them as short as possible. I'm going to stop reading at 300 words. I have to read them all. You don't. But keep them, within a reasonable amount. And like I said, keep it positive and encourage one another. I want to just say one thing about this that occurred to me as I was putting together the syllabus and talking with Professor Fennell and considering what the actual purpose of this program is. And it occurred to me that what we are doing back in the 90s when I went through, what we're doing in this program is the kind of thing that we would do in supervised pastoral ministry, field placement, our internships, and there was no grade. There was no grade for that at all. It was part of the work that we just naturally did, and we submitted to the discipline of our supervisors and our teachers, and they gave us feedback, and we could take the feedback or leave it, but there was no grade. That's not the system you work in today. I have to give grades. Never liked them. And trust me, I wasn't threatened by them. But I never cared for grades as a form of valuation. There is absolutely nothing in this, if you do the work, that is going to create a problem for you grade-wise. I'm not going to promise you a minimum grade. I'm not going to promise you a maximum grade. I had one student years ago, and I'm not going to tell the whole story, who chose his final paper, and it was a course very much like this one, as a topic of his final paper, not to choose one of the topics that he was given, but instead choose a 5-page critique of me. And although I did certainly appreciate what he had to say, it didn't satisfy the terms of the assignment, and he refused to provide another paper. He didn't fail, but he didn't get into the next level either. It leaves me no choice. So watch what the parameters are, stick to them. Okay, I'm going to cut this one off for the moment, and hope that has resolved a few questions that you had, and I'm going to submit another one. I'm going to talk a little bit about content of the course. So bye for now. And there will be another one on the same page in just a minute.